Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel Philosmos, where everything philosophical is discussed. Now, today I'll be talking about neuroexistentialism and basically explaining what exactly that is and how that relates to you and your life. So you're probably wondering, what on earth is neuroexistentialism? So let me briefly explain what existentialism is. So existentialism is basically the pursuit to find meaning in life through your own personal will and through your own choices, and that there are multiple possible events that you can derive meaning from, and simultaneously all those events have no inherent meaning. So there are three waves in existentialism, and neuroexistentialism is the third wave that was termed by, let me just get the name of the book, hold on a second. Sorry, the name of the book is Neuroexistentialism, and this book was written by Greg Caruso and Owen Flanagan. I'm not too sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But yes, so they interpret existentialism, the school of thought and philosophy in which I explained, having three waves. So the first wave was a wave in which we understood meaning and will to be attributed to God's will. And then the second wave, existentialism, perceived meaning to be extracted from common goodwill. But the problem that came with that is like Nazi Germany, in which the common goodwill is not necessarily inherently good. So the third wave of existentialism is actually one that's dawning upon us right now, in which the discoveries in neuroscience and the discoveries in modern science as well kind of get us to see the universe in a purely deterministic point of view, in which it's very challenging to actually extract meaning out of. So the reason why I'm doing this video is because I agree with the sentiments of this book in terms of the time that we're heading towards, because of the discoveries in neuroscience. And in neuroscience, you're basically compulsion. You're basically a sum of compulsion, that your environment is continuously feeding you information, and you are responding to that information on a basis that totally eradicates your own personal will. So you have no innate control in predetermined events in the universe. So this school of thought actually eradicates your sense of will, and it also eradicates the sense of meaning and the sense of God being taken out of the equation because of these discoveries. And I'm not necessarily saying that God is out of the equation. It's just that the momentum in discoveries in modern science and in contemporary existentialism and schools of thought and neuroscience, they all point towards an existence where we human beings have to create our own meaning, and we human beings cannot derive meaning from notions like God, because notions like God work on semantics, and semantics are birthed from how you define particular words. So when I hear the word God, I immediately think from the Judeo-Christian perspective, in which God is an entity that prevails the universe, or exists in a dimension, or exists beyond me, in which he makes judgments about my existence and coercively has goodwill on my life. You see, so that notion of God is heavily challenged. So our new conception of what God is needs to be altered and changed in order to suit the discoveries in modern science. And I think the idea of God does not necessarily need to be eradicated and removed. I think the idea of God is actually essential in being human, since our brain naturally looks to find meaning. So not in essence that it's necessary to have the notion of God, because we don't need God to understand morality. I think morality is actually imbued within the fabric of nature, because when you study organisms, when you study the patterns of behavior of mammals, you realize that there is some morality that there is at play. So morality is not necessarily reserved for human beings solely, but it's actually something that's a natural phenomena. So if we can now engineer and generate our own moralities that are based upon your own particular experiences, and we could all share a particular idea of what God is. And God does not need to be a God that needs to be historical, in the sense that we study events that happened thousands of years ago in order to understand this God, but it can be a God that we can attribute to the present moment that is right here, right now. God can be the expression of nature as we see it at present time, and we could radically imbue new characteristics within God that could correlate with the discoveries in neuroscience and in modern science as well. And that's why I'm such a advocate for quantum physics, because I believe that's the best description of God to date, because quantum physics actually points towards a universe that is more interconnected than we actually realize, and a universe that shares an essence, that each individual particle shares that particular essence and it shares that particular energy. So essentially we can actually derive our sense of meaning from these findings and see that our understanding of God is actually incorrect, that we need to formulate a new image, a new perception of what God is that matches the discoveries in neuroscience and physics and modern science as well. And I think that's not going to be a difficult feat at all, because if we exclude our preconceived ideas of what morality is and just look at the traits to which we observe in the discoveries in science, like for one, the experiment, what was it called again in quantum physics, the double slit experiment, in which the observer has a capacity and has the ability and has the power basically to collapse the wave function and create a definite experience. So the observer is actually perpetually creating the universe that we see at present time. So the observer being God, the observer being the one that creates experiences. And then entanglement, yes, entanglement, in which two particles that are stretched out from vast distances, whatever you do to one particle immediately affects the other particle. So essentially we could say that these are two particles, but in essence really it's one particle, because whatever you do to that particle inevitably affects the other one. So there must be something that we're not particularly seeing because we do not have the apparatuses to, but when we actually develop the correct apparatuses to see this, then we maybe can actually see that we're not looking at various different particles, but we're actually looking at one particle from different perspectives. And in that notion, then God is everything. God is you, God is me, God is the tree, God is the sky, God is everything. So if we just learn to incorporate and grow our idea on what God is, because God is the most relevant notion for humanity. Certain concepts within schools of philosophies and schools in science can send humanity into a nihilistic point of view, in which the coming future that we're going to experience could be one of our darkest ages, because now we're going to be seeking meaning individually, and we are not even trained or initiated to be able to perform that feat, because for eons we have been relying on religious texts and notions about what God is, and we have relied on that to create meaning. But now, for the fact that we are going to be beings and agents that self-generate meaning is actually going to be a difficult feat at first if we're not initiated and if we're not trained in order to perform this. So I think the fundamental thing that needs to be done by all human beings in this time is to truly, utterly investigate who you truly are in essence. Now, I can conceptually tell you, I can logically tell you what you are. I can tell you right now, you are consciousness. But if you do not have the experience of knowing that you are consciousness, then these are just words and these are just semantics that you can register logically and agree with intellectually, but you have no experiential factor connected to it. So it doesn't give you a sense of meaning when I say that you are consciousness. So that is why I advocate that you deeply investigate who you are, because in this time, in the discoveries that we're going to have in terms of AI and technologies that disregard every single thing that we have believed to be true, which is going to be an age where we're going to be at a crisis because we have not developed the ability to reason without distributing that power to the great thinkers of the world, or to our politicians, or to our governments, or to our religious leaders. We're incapable of thinking individually and independently. So the only way out of that madness, the way out of this madness that's going to occur in our lives in the near future, is to discover who you truly are. And this can be done through myriads of forms, but I do suggest meditation. Meditation is a great way for you to tap into your essence and to tap into your being, because essentially I believe that school of thought as well, that everything has an essence before it becomes a definite particular thing. So neuroexistentialism is correct in the sense that we are moving towards the age in which there's going to be a crisis, in which meaning is not going to be extracted from notions that we have long held to be true, but now we're going to have to individually forge and create new philosophies and new ideas and new templates in order to adjust our behaviors and actions. So you needn't be worried when scientists make discoveries that the universe is deterministic. Determinism is an idea that is flawed because it essentially states that conscious entities, right, are observing a universe that is determined. So conscious entities then can determine what that determinism entails and what that determinism means and how that determinism is filtered. So free will always comes around full circle, and it's also the most practical thing that we can actually entertain, because if we live in a universe that is purely deterministic, then we can never necessarily communicate, we can never necessarily live in a society that is just, that is orderly, and a society that is beneficial for each individual. So basically what I'm saying is that our idea of God needs to mold and needs to grow and needs to evolve. And this idea of God should be a God that incorporates all of humanity and incorporates all of nature and incorporates all of the universe. And I think quantum physics is actually a science that is akin to what God is. You can never define what God is, you can never truly understand what God is, but you can never grow in your marvel, in your awe, and in what God is capable of doing. And I'm using the word God very sensitively here, because it's I do not mean God from the religious point of view. I just mean God as the word that is the closest relationship that I know to infinity, to whatever essence, whatever energy brought about this universe that we perceive with our eyes right now. So to wrap this up, in the near future is a very interesting time for humanity. The discoveries that are going to be ensued in terms of the sciences is going to be truly mind-blowing, and it's going to radically shift our consciousness. And to those that are heavily attached to what they believe to be true in terms of religion, in terms of meaning, then I advise you to be a bit more fluid with those ideas, because in the coming time you're going to be challenged in those notions. And do not fear being challenged. In fact, evolve your ideas and evolve them with the discoveries in science. And then this neuroexistentialism period in which these people are predicting and forecasting on humanity, which I believe the propensity of it is actually inevitable. But if we have a basic understanding first, then we can tackle this situation in the most appropriate way. So thank you very much for listening to this video, guys. Please like, please share, please subscribe. And to end it off, as I always end it off, for those who seek, seek no more, for in the present we find it all.